Today's daf is daf Chaf Beis. Iboilu, who are the last two words on Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. The Gemara raises the following stuff. Holach Gadol Abayis Lebeis HaKvaro. So what happens is that the Gadol Abayis is in charge of burial. And he may be taking the mita, the aram, some distance away from the house. And the other Avelim are behind, meaning they're not coming with him necessarily to bury the dead. And therefore they want to start, and they can start the Shiva immediately after the mita goes out. Let's say, for example, if they take the coffin out of the city on the way to the cemetery, at that point, the Bnei Abayis, the Avelim, can start their Avelis. They don't have to wait till what's called Stimas HaGola, till the actual burial. Mao, what's the status of the Gadol Abayis? Does he have to wait until after Stimas HaGola to begin his Shiva? Or is he considered part of the Bayis? And since the Bnei Abayis began already their Shiva, and it may take him a long time until he gets to the cemetery, gets back to the cemetery to join them. When he joins them, can he be integrated into their counting of Shiva such that he doesn't have to start from the beginning and count a full 7 days? Let's say, for example, he comes back, they've already counted a day or two. He can, on one side of the Gemara Suffolk, he can link up with them and finish up the balance of the next 5 days of Shiva, and that's it. He doesn't have to start from day one. Or do we say, no, he's independent, he's involved in the actual Kvura, and Avelus will start for him with Kvura, with Stimas HaGola. So that's the Gemara's sub. And as a general rule, the halacha differentiates between the first 3 days and the other 4 days, and we discussed this already in the past. The main Avelus is the first 3 days. That's really the Avelus Amura, the intense and profound Avelus. So if he's not going to even join when he returns until after day 3, then he's an independent agent. Then for sure the Gemara would hold he has to start Shiva and count from day 1. If he comes within the first 3 days, so that he gets at least part of the kiyum of Nihuge Avelus of Avelus Chamura, the first 3 days, that's where the Gemara has a tzad to suggest that maybe he can be integrated and count the Shiva together with the other Avelim. Toshma, we learned in a statement actually from the Omer Abchia Bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu holach gadol abayis lebeis hakvaros mode iman. In other words, it sounds like, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we accept that tzad in the Gemara Ziboilahu that he can link up with the rest of the household, the other Avelim, and count with them. They've already counted a day or two. He can now jump on the bandwagon, be integrated with them, and Lamaisa, he'll only have 5 days of Shiva because the first 2 days he was busy with the Kvura. So the Gemara asks, Moni Moya Vatanya Mona Liatzmo. We have a brisa that contradicts this statement and takes the opposite view that he, the Gadol Abayis in this case, is independent of the Shar Bnei Abayis. Is there any way of reconciling Rabbi Yochanan's statement that he is Mona Imohem with the statement of the Brisa that Mona Liatzmo, Lo Kash, Hadi Asa B'go Tilsa, Had Lo Asa B'go Tilsa. If he returns from the burial within the first 3 days of Shiva, right, he takes a Concorde plane. I don't know, they're out of use, but anyway, he gets back on time before the first 3 days have lapsed. Then he could join together with the other Avelim and just finish up the Shiva. When they finish up the Shiva, that's the psak of Rabbi Yochanan. But the Brisa is addressing a different case, where lo asu b'go tos. He doesn't get back within the first 3 days. And therefore, the major chunk of Avelus and Nihuge Avelus has already been implemented. He'll miss that out because he's returning after the third day. In that case, it's Moda Liatzmo. He is independent of the bias. He has to count a full 7 days. And Kiyaha, we're going to support this with the following story. The Amar Lahu Rav Lebnei Hatzlafoni. Rav instructed the people of a place called Hatzlafoni. The Asubago Tulsa Limnu Badaihu. The Lo Asubago Tulsa Limnu Linafshayu. Now, in this particular context, Rav is not addressing the case of Godol Shebabayis necessarily. He's talking about a case where some of the mourners are far away and they could not join the base Avel at the beginning of Shiva because they have to travel to get to the base Avel in order to begin their Shiva. But Rav is maintaining the distinction between the first 3 days of Shiva and the balance of Shiva. So those Avelim who come late and they weren't there for the beginning of Shiva, but they make it there before day 3, they can be integrated into the Avelus. They count Shiva together with those who started the Avelus on time, and they will finish the Avelus at the end of the time that the people who are already Avelim from the get-go finish their Shiva. But if these individuals will join them at a delay of more than 3 days, so they didn't overlap with the Avelim and the Kiyum Avelus in the Beis Avel, even one moment of the 3 days, then they have to start Shiva from the beginning and count their own Shiva. We see a very clear parallel between our discussion in the context of Rabbi Yochanan regarding the Av HaBayis or the Gol Shebabayis who comes back after the Kura, and the case of mourners who were late and they were delayed in joining the base of Amalahu Rava L'Bnei Machos. Rava told the people of his city, Atun delo azilu basar arsa. You do not go out to the burial place. You stay behind, because very often they would take the body a far distance, like for example from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. So not everyone would accompany the body to Eretz Yisrael for burial. So therefore, the lo azlitu basar arsa is mechima adrisu apaychu mibava de abula aschilu limnos. As soon as you are mahader ape means he turns his face away. Mibava, from the gates of the abula of the entrance into the city. So you escort the mess till you get out of the gates of the city. As soon as you turn your face around, facing back into the city to return back to your home, start counting Shiva at that point. Even though it's before the burial. Whereas those who are accompanying the body for burial, maybe they're making the trek all the way to Eretz Yisrael for the burial, their status is a different status entirely. They have to wait until Stima Sagola, until the actual burial, in order to begin counting Shiva. But those who are not going, they're not accompanying the deceased to the burial, they begin counting their Shiva the moment that they turn away towards home at the gates of the city. Rav Shimon has a different opinion. Afilu ba biyom hashvi mimakom karov modi moed. Even if those who were delayed in their return to the Beis Avel, to the point in which they came back to the Beis Avel only on the last day of Shiva, as long as they were coming mimakom karov, which means a day's journey, then mona imohem, which means that their nig avelos would be an hour, the last hour on day 7. So again, although these may be people who escort the dead to the burial, it's possible, and therefore we would have said that their abelus should begin with stimas hagolel. Rav Shimon Omer is mona imohem. He can integrate himself into the Beis Avel and count Shiva with them. Amar Rab Chia bar Gamda, Amar Rab Yossi ben Shol, Amar Rebbe. V'hu sheba u'matza menachamim etzlo. The halacha of Rabbi Shimon, that you can link up with the Avelim even on the last day of Shiva, that only applies when there were menachamim, meaning he got back to the Beis Avel to join the other mourners early enough so that there could be nicham avelim. In other words, there's got to be some sort of profound fulfillment of avelus in that last day of Shiva when he joins the rest of the mourners. And what would constitute that profound kiyum, fulfillment of avelus? It would be nicham avelim. So there's still menachamim available to be menachem. So he will join the Beis Avel at the end of the Shiva. The menachem will come to be menachem him, and that's his fulfillment of the mitzvah of avelus. And I suspect that this is a reflection of what we call kavod hames. This is not for the purpose of consoling the heart of the Avel. I mean, the Gemara is setting up a more formalistic action of nichum avelim. But that nichum is part and parcel of the kiyum of kavod hames, of setting up a Beis Avel in deference to the mes. Boy, Rav Hanan, Ninaru la'amod v'lo amdu ma'u. You're telling me that there has to be menachem in the Beis Avel when he returns to join the other avelim. Well, what happens if the people who want to be menachem have been involved in nichum avelim for, let's say, 5 out of the 6 avelim? Now the 6th avel comes in; they have already stood up to leave. Is that considered as if they've already left? Or is it enough that before they step out of the Beis Avel, they are menachem with some sort of formalistic, perhaps, nusach of nichum avelim, amokim yachem esken, teku? And the Gemara says, we don't have an answer to this. So how late is late? And the Gemara is tzad to say it's even as late as the fact that the last menachem have already stood up and they're on their way out. But still you can catch them and ask them to be menachem, have them be menachem, and that would be a kiyum of avilus. And although it's a teku situation, but we have a rule in avilus that halacha k'divrei mekil ba'avel. So we would be mekil in this case. Gmiri chavrei de Rabbi Abba bar Chia me Rabbi Abba. Gmiri means a mesiras haTorah. And a friend of Rabbi Abba received a mesiras haTorah from Rabbi Abba. Umanu, and who is this friend of Rabbi Abba? This so-called anonymous chavrei de Rabbi Abba. It was none other than Rabbi Zera. According to another tradition, chavrei de Rabbi Zera me Rabbi Zera. It was a friend of Rabbi Zera that received this tradition from Rabbi Zera. Umanu, what's his name? Rabbi Abba Brei de Rabbi Chia bar Abba. And all this is a tradition in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Halacha ki Rabbi Shimon Gamliel v'treifos, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon bi'ava. We will accept both the das Yochanan, right, the minority view of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in treifos, as well as his minority view in Av. So the Gemara explains. Rabbi Shimon bi'avel hadamaran. And according to Rabbi Shimon, if an Avel is karo and was out there burying the dead and he returned on the 7th day of Avelus, he can be Moed Iman. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel v'treifos, and b'nei me'ayim shenikvu. So we're talking about the intestines that were punctured. The lecha sotamtam, but there is a certain mucus which closes up those punctures. The lecha sotatman, this mucus, which is called lecha, sort of plugs up these holes. Sheira, it's no longer a treif. Divrei Reb Shimon Gamliel. My lecha. So, what is the biological function or definition of this lecha? Amar of Kahana, Shirka, Dima'aya, Dinafak Agav Ducha. Me'aya is the intestines, what we call the kishkis, and Shirka is a liquid, some sort of liquid substance. Dime'aya, from the intestines. Dinafik, and how do you remove this mucus, this liquid from the intestines? Agav duchaka. Duchaka means dochak. We have to push it out with pressure. So if there's pressure on the me'ayin, then this lecha comes out, and the lecha will fill in the holes, plug up the holes in the intestines. And that's enough to render the animal kosher. Amar manhu, some anonymous person made the following statement when he heard these decisions and rulings of Rabbi Yochanan. Izki v'asik v'gamra l'shmaita b'pumi demora. I would love to merit going up to Eretz Yisrael. Izki, miloshen schus. The asik means to go up, because from Babel to Eretz Yisrael you climb. Babel was lower down. The Agman, I will learn the Shmaita mipumi demara. Pumi demara means the one who made the statement. I want to go back to the original and hear it from the mouth of the master. Ki solik. When he went to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechei Rabbi Abba, Braid Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Omar Le. Now, again, it was Rabbi Abba who had quoted this sak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Omar Mar Halocha ki Rav Shimon Gamliel b'Treifos. Did you actually say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we pass like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in Treifos? In the case of B'nayim Shenikru V'lecha Sotamtam, Amalei, Ana Ein Halacha. Amri. I said that the halacha is not like Rav Shimon Gamliel, which means that we're going to be machmir and we're going to consider the animal treifa as a result of the fact that the intestines were punctured. Rav Shimon v'Avel Mai, did you paskin, however, like Rav Shimon and Avel? Amalei said to him, Plukta Ninu. The question of whether we accept Rav Shimon Gamliel, that he can link up with the Avelim and the last moment of the Avelis at the end of Shiva, is in fact a dispute, a subject of dispute. The Idmar, Rav Chizda Amar Halacha, Rav Chizda says that we pass like Rav Shimon, Chen Amar Rav Yochanan Halacha, and Rav Nachman Amar Ein Halacha. We don't pass like Rav Shimon in this case. So now the Gemara goes back to what we discussed before. The Ein Halacha ki Rav Shimon Gamliel b'Treifos, v'Halacha Rav Shimon be'Avel, the Amar Shmuel Halacha ki Divrei HaMekil ba'Avel. So in Treifos, when we're dealing with Isa v'Heter, though Raz Din is Safek L'Chumra, and therefore we have to go Basarov, and we pass like the majority against Rav Shimon, who's the Das Yochid, and we're going to pass on that the animal is treifa. But when it comes to the din of Avil, we always accept the Mekil, the more lenient view, and therefore we pass like Reb Shimon Gamliel. Now we learn a brayso. Al kol hamesim kulam madche mitaso hareze meshubach. Now the Gemara wants to know the following. This is very relevant to Halach L'Maisa today, as it was always. To what extent do we have to speed up the process of burial from the moment of death? On the one hand, it's covered a mess to bury the mess immediately, urgently, but on the other hand, there's also a dimension of covered a mess, which is hesped. And if we want to maximize hesped, we may have to delay the burial of the dead. And here, the Bryce is going to distinguish between general Avelus and Avelus al Aviv Val Imo. And that distinction is going to come up over and over and over again. With regard to Stam Avelus, you lose a brother, a sister, you lose a child, Rahman al-Islam, a wife, a husband. In those cases, Madche, delay burying the dead. Mitas the coffin. And Areza Meshubach, why? Because we want to expand the time for Hesped. In other words, if we're in such a rush to bury the dead, we won't be maspid kihil chasa lichvich voda shel mes. So that's true with regard to all relatives, except for al aviv al imo harezim aguna. When it comes to parents, this is not a good idea to delay the burial. We want the burial to take place as soon as possible. Just 1 second, let me just make sure I got it right. Maybe I got it wrong here. 1 second. Again, if it's other avelim madcha mitaso, I'm sorry. I thought madcha is milashon dichui. How do you translate the word madcha? Expedite. It's what? Okay. So it's exactly opposite. I made a mistake. I thought madcha means lidchot, to delay it. On the contrary, it means that he should be memayer the burial. Let's see if he explains why. In other words, we don't eulogize them so much, and therefore in this collision between, on the one hand, the urgency of burying them, and on the other hand, the covered up mess of eulogy, we will defer in favor of burying the mess as soon as possible, and we will minimize the eulogies if necessary. However, al aviv imo, then hareze maguna. If he is quickly burying the dead at a very fast pace, that's not a good idea. Why? Because with regard to parents, one is obligated to eulogize and mourn for them profusely. Therefore, one should delay the burial and eulogize and mourn for them while they await burial. So this would be very relevant. Let's say if Rahman al-Islam, a person he lives in Eretz Yisrael, he loses a parent in Chutz La'aretz, maybe they should delay the burial a bit. I don't know how long, but a couple of hours maybe, in order to get the one over to Chutz La'aretz who's going to make a eulogy, like a son or something. However, even in the case of parents, where we wanted to delay the burial to allow for an expansion of the eulogies, but not on Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, in those cases, we want to expedite the burial as soon as possible. Hareza Meshubach. She'eno oseh ela l'kvod aviv v'imo. What does it mean, covered avimo? If they delay for the sake of eulogies, then what might happen is, since it's Erev Shabbos, Erev Yonta, they won't get a chance to bury the dead before Shabbos. They'll have to bury the dead after Shabbos. That's not covered avis. So even if it means curtailing the eulogies for Aviv the Imo for the sake of not risking the possibility that we'll have to delay the burial till after Shabbos, then we have to curtail the eulogies and bury the dead as soon as possible. Al kol ha-mesim kulam rotza memayit b'isko rotza eino. There's no absolute requirement with regard to stam avelim. Stam misa means the exception of avimo. And there's no requirement to be mamayit be'isko. So if he loses a brother, he doesn't have to be mamayit be'isko. Now, we have to understand what this means because we already learned that an ovel is enjoined from doing malacha. But I guess here we're not talking about malacha per se. We're talking about isko. It's not heavy-duty malacha. That would be awesome. So when it says rotza eno, he has the option that he doesn't have to be mamayit be'isko. In these kinds of, dealings, he picks up a phone and he says, oh, I want you to buy this property or invest in a stock or a bond or something like that. That's okay because that's not real heavy-duty malacha. And that was not prohibited.